lists. So all we want to do here is basically add a submit button down at the bottom of our form. So our form will post to our action page, which will be show country. And on show country, we'll just need one line of PHP code where we can print out or display the choice the user picked in the dropdown. Then we're done with this page. Then we'll try and incorporate this logic into a more sort of fully fleshed out form. Okay. So if you want to go back to your form, so we have this div tag that contains our dropdown list. So below it, we'll just put in an input type equals submit. Thank you. So below our div tag that holds our dropdown, we'll put in a submit button. We'll give it a value of equal to submit. And we can just self-close the tag. So this will generate a submit button on our page below the dropdown. So I'm just going to upload that to this, re-upload to the server. And now we can actually pick a country. And we get a 404 not found, which is okay because we haven't built show country yet. We'll build that file next. We'll add one line of code where we can evaluate the drop-down selection printed to the screen, and we're done with these pages. So I want you to go ahead now, once you've got your submit button on your form, I want you to make a new PHP page and save it as show-country.php. Because that's going to be our form action. We're looking for a page called show country. So I'm going to make a new PHP file. I'll just put in a descriptive title, and I'll save this in my folder for today as showcountry.php. So we'll just add 2 lines of code here. The first section will store the selected country in a variable. And then we'll display a message that includes the selected country. That's it, 2 simple lines of code. So storing the choice from a drop-down is no different than how we would store the values entered in a text box. So we did that 2 weeks ago. Maybe, sorry, 3 weeks ago. So we'll maybe create a variable called country. How do we get the value from our drop-down list on the previous page?
Use the post.
Right, so we can reference our post collection, and what element in the post collection holds the country? What's the name of it? Right, it's just what we called our drop-down list, which is called country. So that'll give us the value, and now we just want to print a message. It says you selected, and if we use double quotes, we can then just embed our variable straight into our string. So on this page, the drop-down isn't treated any differently than a text box. We just use $post and the name of the drop-down list, and we can access the value that the user selected. So I'm going to upload my file. And I'll just refresh it and resend my form post. And it tells me what I selected. I want to go back and pick something else. It'll show whatever is selected, right? So if we now wanted to save that value to the database, we've got that selection in a variable so we can save it. So you'll need this piece in your assignment because part of your form will include one drop-down that we filled just the way we filled the country drop-down. And when you save the text values, you'll have to save any drop-down values to the database as well. Does anybody have any questions so far about working with the drop-down list? Anything not clear? Doesn't make sense to you? So what we're going to do, we'll do a little practice with another drop-down. I'll give you a chance to build one on your own. So I'm going to show you the page I want you to build. Are there any questions about this page before I leave? Does anybody still need the code for a minute?
Can you please explain the false ones?
Sure. So our drop-down is inside of a form. Our form is using the post method to send the data to the server. Okay, we did this back in week 2. I'm going to open up the files from week 2. So we had these 2 pages, which we did a couple weeks ago. So here was our form where we had 3 text boxes, and each text box has a unique name, right? So we had first name, we have last name, and we had email. So when we looked at our form in the browser, we have 3 text boxes. So our form uses the method post to send the data to this server, and our action page, this receives the information. So on our save page, we could reference each text box with $_post and then the name of our text box. And we stored each value into a variable. So not only can our form include text boxes like these, but our form, this form had no text boxes, but instead it has a select, a drop-down list. But because it's part of our form and our form uses post, then we can access that value in the same way. Okay. So in your assignment, if I should go back to my sample, so I have 4 text boxes here and 1 drop-down. So on my save page, I have a page called Save Player. It will use post first name to get that value, post last name for this value, post number, post position for the drop-down value.
So post indicates that value for the first page.
Yes, that's right. It's the form inputs from the previous page are all stored in. Post is an array or a collection. So all of the inputs on the form are included in the post array. Did I answer your question? Okay. Anybody else? Any other questions? Okay. So I'm just going to go back to the database for a minute. We created this table, which is blank. We created a request table. So our request table has these columns: name, email, province, and reason. There's no data in there. So what I want you guys to do is to build a form, build a new page called request.php, and I'm going to show you what it looks like. And rather than me walking you through it, I'm going to give you a chance to build it on your own first. So here's what the page should look like. So you'll need a form with 2 text boxes, one for name and one for email. Then you'll have a drop-down list for province. And the script I gave you that we ran has all of the provinces. So you already have this table in your database. If you look, you'll have a provinces table. And if you click browse, you're going to see those records sorted this way. So I want you to populate the province table. And then, if you can, figure out how to make the first option say select. Obviously, we don't have the select value in our database, so you'll need to put that in before you loop through and add the rest of the provinces. And then our reason field is bigger. It's another text field. But if we go in here, it holds up to 5,000 characters. So rather than a single line text box, we've used a multi-line text box. We haven't used one of these before in this class. So rather than using an input tag, what kind of HTML tag do we need that will give us a multi-line box?
Text area?
Yeah, so if we inspect the element in the browser, so it's going to render as a text area that has an opening and closing tag. Okay, and then a submit button. So I'll show you the code for this in a bit, but I'm going to give you a chance to spend some time working through this on your own. So build a new page called request. You'll need a form with 2 text boxes, a province drop-down, and a text area and submit button. And then we'll write the code after that will check the inputs, and if the inputs are good, we'll save them to the database. If any of the inputs have been omitted, we will show the user what they've left out and give them a chance to fix their mistakes. Okay, so I'll give you something you can work together. This is not for marks. You don't have to submit it to me. This is a chance for you to get a bit of practice. Okay, because this is very similar to what you have to build for your assignment in terms of the form. So I've got a form with method equals post. I created an action called save request. My first 2 boxes are pretty simple, just 2 text boxes called name and email. And then I've pretty much repeated the code from our country drop-down. There's really only one small change. What line have I added that we didn't have on our select country page? Yeah, okay, so our SQL query is different, yep. There's one thing that's different above that. Yeah, so I hard-coded in to my list before we started our loop. I created an option that says select, which will force the user to pick their province rather than just defaulting to AB as the first choice. So this is an option. You don't have to do this, but generally it's a good idea when we give somebody a drop-down list to put in a default choice, prompting them to choose something. The rest of our code here is the same as what you already have. Okay, so we've connected, we're running our query, these lines are identical, execute the query, store the results, loop through, and this time instead of outputting countries, we're outputting the provinces into option tags. And for our final input, we used a text area, because that'll give us a multi-line text box so the user can enter in a big block of text. And then we've got our submit down at the bottom. So if you fill out your form and click submit, you should get a 404 error because we have yet to build the save request page. So this form is a pretty good representation of what you might build for your assignment. Although, of course, you're going to build your own thing.
Can you see the bottom?
Yep, sure. So I've just used text area instead of input.
Yeah.
We haven't used that one before.
Okay.
So this is part of your decision as a designer when you're building a form. How big, if I'm asking for text, how many characters does the database allow? Because that's going to tell you whether to use a regular input box or whether you need to use a text area instead. If we're expecting more than a few words, then we probably want a text area. Any more than, say, 100 characters, if the database column holds more than 100 characters, we probably want to use a text area rather than a single line text box. So make any changes you need to your form, and then when you upload it, it should resemble pretty closely to this one. Text box, drop down, text area, and submit button. I'm just going to upload my file. Okay, so your page should look pretty much like this in the browser. Lucy, question?
Mine doesn't show the reason text box.
So it just ends here?
Yeah.
Okay, if that's the case, there's probably an error on the drop-down. It probably looks something like this.
Yeah.
So if that's the case, there's an error and there's no provinces? Okay, so to see the error, there's an error happening in the PHP code there. If we view the source, I've put in the bad password, so it crashes there, so the rest of the form. So right-click and view the source, and you'll see the error message.
Oh.